What if I told you that everything the world thinks it knows about Meghan Markle, her struggles, her tears, her pain, was carefully orchestrated? That's some of the most emotional moments you've seen, the ones that made millions gasp, sympathize, and even cry along with her, were not spontaneous at all. What if the person who helped her craft that image was her own mother? That's exactly what Doria Ragland has revealed, shattering the public perception of Meghan's so-called authenticity. She admitted in stunning detail, "We rehearsed the tears. I regret helping her lie." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It's almost impossible to comprehend. For years, Meghan Markle has been framed as the ultimate outsider, the victim in a world of cold tradition and harsh criticism. The narrative was clear. Meghan, struggling with the pressures of royal life, mistreated by a family and a media machine that refused to understand her, bravely speaking out against the establishment. But according to Doria, much of that story was carefully scripted. Every sigh, every glance, every tear at highly publicized events, some allegedly staged, rehearsed, and performed on cue. Consider the Oprah Winfrey interview, a media phenomenon. Millions of viewers around the globe watched, captivated by Meghan's honesty, or so they thought. But Doria now claims that even that interview, lauded as a moment of raw vulnerability, was part of a larger performance. She recounts being coached on what to say, how to react, and even when to cry. Meghan instructed her, shaping the narrative like a director shaping a film scene. And Doria followed along, until the guilt became too much. Why does this matter? Because what you saw was not just entertainment. It was manipulation. It was the construction of a public persona designed to elicit sympathy and control the narrative. And when the person closest to you, someone you trust implicitly, confesses that they helped orchestrate your public image, it raises uncomfortable questions. How much of Meghan's story was genuine? How much was a carefully curated act designed to sway public opinion? And if her mother could be convinced to participate, what does that say about the authenticity of every tear and every word? It's easy to see the world through social media filters, through news headlines and Instagram posts. Meghan, radiant and composed, often presented as a figure of elegance and sophistication, someone who handled adversity with grace. But behind the scenes, according to Doria, there were scripts, rehearsals, and performance notes, each moment designed to tug at heartstrings, to project vulnerability while maintaining absolute control over the narrative. It's the kind of revelation that makes you pause and question everything you thought you knew. Doria's confession is particularly striking because it exposes the tension between personal loyalty and ethical responsibility. A mother is supposed to protect her child, to support them unconditionally. But what happens when that support crosses the line into complicity? Doria admits she helped Meghan perform a role, one that presented her as the victim of circumstance, the misunderstood outsider. The regret is palpable in her voice. She acknowledges that she played a part in constructing illusions that millions consumed as truth. It's a deeply human story, tinged with guilt, love, and the inevitable consequences of deception. The story also invites us to examine the mechanics of public persona. In an age dominated by media exposure and social scrutiny, image becomes currency. For someone like Meghan Markle, whose every move is analyzed and dissected, controlling the narrative isn't optional, it's survival. Yet when control over the narrative extends to scripting emotions, when personal relationships are enlisted in the service of performance, the line between authenticity and fabrication blurs. Doria's revelation forces us to confront that line and reconsider the authenticity of public figures we may have trusted without question. And the implications are staggering. For the royal family, for the media, for fans and critics alike. If some of Meghan's most lauded emotional moments were rehearsed, does that diminish the very real scrutiny and criticism she faced? Or does it suggest a more strategic, calculating side to a public figure often portrayed as purely victimized? It's a narrative fraught with contradictions, irony, and tension, a story that challenges our assumptions and forces a reassessment of what we believe. But let's not stop there. Doria's statements also hint at a broader pattern. If her involvement was necessary to sustain Meghan's public image, it raises questions about the broader network of advisors, publicists, and confidants who may have been complicit in maintaining this performance. It suggests that what we saw in the headlines, on talk shows, and in viral clips may have been just the tip of a carefully constructed iceberg. Every tear, every heartfelt statement, every dramatic pause potentially orchestrated to maximize impact. It's easy to imagine the reactions of the audience: shock, disbelief, maybe even anger. After all, the image of Meghan as a victim has inspired movements, drawn attention to serious issues of race, gender, and mental health, and sparked global conversations. But Doria's revelation complicates that narrative. It doesn't simply contradict the story. It introduces layers of manipulation, familial complicity, and calculated performance that we hadn't considered before. It's the kind of information that changes the lens through which we view history, media, and the people who shape our perceptions. And yet, there's a paradox here. The very act of revelation, Doria's confession, also carries weight precisely because it humanizes both mother and daughter. There's no suggestion of malice, only human fallibility. Doria acted out of loyalty, a desire to support her daughter, and perhaps even out of hope that the performance would protect Meghan from criticism or harm. The regret she now voices doesn't only indict the performance. It illuminates the human cost of public life, of curated personas, and the moral compromises made in the spotlight. The first question every viewer must wrestle with is this: if a mother could participate in rehearsed tears, staged emotional moments, and calculated public appearances, what does that say about our understanding of authenticity in public life? It's not just Meghan's story. It's a lens through which we must examine celebrity culture, media influence, and the interplay between private motives and public perception. Every tear we witness, every heartfelt statement broadcast to millions, suddenly requires scrutiny. It also challenges our perception of trust. Doria Ragland is not just a bystander. She's a participant who now steps forward to admit the truth. That admission creates a tension. Can we trust Meghan's public statements after this? Can we separate the strategic performances from genuine moments? And if we can't, what does that mean for the way public figures are consumed, idolized, or criticized? It's a revelation that demands reflection, and perhaps even reevaluation of long-held beliefs. The timing of this revelation is crucial. With ongoing media coverage, public fascination with the royal family, and the enduring intrigue surrounding Meghan and Harry's departure from traditional royal duties, Doria's statement arrives like a thunderclap. It reframes prior narratives, forces journalists, fans, and critics to reconsider assumptions, and introduces a new layer of complexity to a story that was already rich with intrigue. The questions it raises are immediate, pressing, and impossible to ignore. And there's a human element that can't be overstated. Imagine the psychological weight of rehearsing your emotions, of being coached to cry, to pause, to react in ways that are meant to sway millions. Imagine the strain of living a life where authenticity is constantly under scrutiny, where your natural reactions must sometimes be replaced with scripted ones. Doria's confession reveals not just the mechanics of performance, but the emotional toll it takes on those involved. Doria doesn't stop at admitting she helped with the tears. She hints at deeper, more shocking aspects of Meghan's performance. Moments that were calculated not just to elicit sympathy, but to strategically manipulate public perception in ways that even insiders didn't fully anticipate. These are the revelations that will redefine how we view Meghan Markle, her rise to global fame, and the very nature of public persona in a world obsessed with celebrity. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever wondered how someone can appear flawless, untouchable, like they were born to live under a spotlight, and yet hide so much behind the surface? That's the world Meghan Markle created for herself. The Meghan the public fell in love with was elegant, poised, articulate, and always seemingly in control. Every outfit meticulously chosen, every smile perfectly timed, every word carefully measured. She became the embodiment of grace under pressure. But what if that persona was less about who she truly was and more about who she wanted the world to see? From the moment she stepped onto the royal stage, Meghan seemed to have the entire playbook memorized. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, social media buzzed, and she navigated it all with what appeared to be natural confidence. People marveled at her charisma. They celebrated her as a modern princess, a woman who defied tradition yet embodied the ideals of royalty. But as Doria Ragland would later reveal, this image wasn't entirely organic. Behind the poised smiles and composed interviews, there were strategies, rehearsals, and yes, instructions even for her mother to follow. Consider the first public appearances with Prince Harry. The world saw a couple in love, radiant, and in sync. But sources close to the family hint that these were carefully curated moments, designed to cement a specific narrative, the fairy tale romance, the perfect match of a prince and a Hollywood star. Every handshake, every laugh, every glance into the cameras was calculated to generate headlines, memes, and admiration. This was the art of the perfect image, carefully sculpted, polished, and broadcast to the world. The public loves a story of transformation. Meghan arrived as an outsider, a Hollywood actress stepping into the rigid traditions of the British monarchy. That narrative alone was irresistible, a woman challenging centuries of protocol while maintaining elegance and intelligence. But what many failed to realize is that her public persona wasn't a spontaneous emergence. It was rehearsed, it was constructed, and it was maintained with meticulous attention to detail. Doria Ragland's recent revelations shine a stark light on just how much effort went into this performance. Even the smallest gestures were part of the script. A gentle nod, a sincere smile, a casual laugh. These were tools in a larger performance designed to endear Meghan to the public. The difference between her real self and her public self blurred over time, until it became nearly impossible to tell the two apart. And that is precisely the brilliance and the danger of a carefully cultivated persona. The audience begins to believe in the perfection, invests emotionally, and suspends disbelief. They applaud vulnerability, they mourn perceived injustices, and they champion the individual as heroic. Doria's confession adds another layer to this story. She described helping Meghan rehearse emotional responses, coaching her mother to participate in the performance, ensuring that the optics aligned with the narrative Meghan wanted to present. It's one thing to carefully choose an outfit or prepare talking points for a televised interview. It's another entirely to choreograph a mother's reactions, to stage tears, to script the pauses and the inflections in a conversation that millions will witness. This was not merely image management, it was performance art. And yet, the brilliance of this persona was in its subtlety. It didn't scream manipulation. It whispered. The public believed they were seeing authenticity. The world embraced Meghan as a symbol of compassion, modernity, and courage. She seemed relatable, yet aspirational, warm yet composed. Every gesture, every word, every public appearance reinforced this carefully constructed image. But beneath the surface, according to Doria, there was tension, unease, and an awareness that the performance was ongoing, and that perfection required constant maintenance. Think about the stakes. A misstep in public could undermine years of careful narrative building. A misplaced word, an unguarded expression, or a fleeting emotional lapse could unravel the image that Meghan had so meticulously crafted. And yet, the pressure to maintain this image wasn't just professional, it was personal. It affected family dynamics, relationships, and even her mother's willingness to participate in the performance. Doria's participation wasn't just a supportive gesture, it became a moral and emotional burden. She was complicit, aware, and eventually conflicted about the role she played in sustaining an image that was part reality, part fabrication. But the public didn't know any of this. They saw only the result, the polished persona of Meghan Markle, the woman who seemed to glide effortlessly between Hollywood glamour and royal decorum. They applauded her speeches, they admired her advocacy, they championed her as an icon of modern womanhood. And while some critics questioned certain behaviors, for the most part, the crafted image held strong. It was compelling. It was believable. It was, in many ways, brilliant. Yet brilliance comes with a cost. Constructing an image that isn't entirely authentic demands constant vigilance. The act of performing one's life as a narrative is exhausting, isolating, and fraught with risk. Every public interaction, every media appearance, every conversation potentially exposes cracks in the facade. And when the cracks appear, they are scrutinized, dissected, and weaponized. Meghan's story, Doria revealed, wasn't immune to this dynamic. The very strategies that elevated her also carried the potential for exposure, guilt, and personal conflict. There's also an irony here that cannot be ignored. The public championed Meghan as authentic, courageous, and victimized. They cheered her for speaking out, for confronting challenges, and for advocating on behalf of causes she cared about. Yet much of the most impactful storytelling, the moments designed to elicit empathy and admiration, may have been orchestrated. The very qualities the public praised could have been part performance. It raises an uncomfortable question. Can you truly admire someone for traits they deliberately perform? And if the admiration is based on a constructed persona, what does that say about our collective appetite for drama, storytelling, and emotional engagement? The answer isn't simple. Public figures, especially those in the extreme glare of media scrutiny, face impossible expectations. They are expected to be authentic, yet flawless, vulnerable, yet composed, relatable, yet extraordinary. It's a balancing act that often demands a level of strategy, planning, and performance that the average person would find exhausting, if not impossible. Meghan's persona, as Doria now suggests, was not just a product of personality. It was a response to these pressures, a carefully calibrated adaptation to survive in a world that scrutinized her every move. And here lies the tension: survival versus authenticity. The persona that protected Meghan also constrained her. It shaped how she moved, spoke, and interacted with the world. It involved other people, Doria, advisors, even friends, becoming part of the performance. Every smile, every tear, every glance into the camera became both shield and trap. The brilliance of the image was matched only by the burden of maintaining it. The public may never see this side of Meghan. They continue to consume the persona, engage with it, and debate its merits. But Doria's confession reminds us that there is a private world behind the public one, a world of preparation, rehearsal, and moral compromise. A world in which appearances matter more than truth. And it forces the audience to confront a disorienting question. If the image we admire is partially constructed, what does that mean for our understanding of the person behind it? The cracks in the facade, however, were inevitable. The more elaborate the performance, the more fragile it becomes. One misstep, one unguarded moment, and the illusion can shatter. And according to Doria, those moments existed, moments of doubt, guilt, and realization. Moments when the lines between authentic emotion and performance blurred, leaving participants questioning their own motives and integrity. The story of Meghan's public persona is not just about image-making. It's about the human cost of performance, the emotional toll of constant scrutiny, and the moral dilemmas inherent in crafting a life for public consumption. But perhaps the most revealing part of this story is what Doria left unsaid in public appearances for years. Every carefully curated moment was a statement, every performance a reflection of strategy, yet the audience remained unaware. And that is the power and danger of a constructed persona. It shapes perception, guides emotion, and influences belief without the observer ever knowing the strings that pull it. And now, the real question looms. If Meghan's public image, the woman the world thought they knew, was carefully constructed, what does that reveal about the narratives she perpetuated about her struggles, her conflicts, and her relationships? Was the empathy she garnered genuine, or was it orchestrated? And if so, what role did the people closest to her, her mother, her advisors, her friends, play in sustaining that illusion? The answer, as we'll see, is far more intricate, shocking, and revealing than anyone could have imagined. But what Doria revealed next about the moments Meghan held most dear, the moments she used to claim the world's sympathy, would change everything, and even her closest allies were stunned. What really happens behind the palace gates, behind the flashing cameras, and away from the prying eyes of the media? What the public never sees is often more revealing than what they do. According to Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, the private world was a stage in itself, a place where rehearsals, scripts, and carefully choreographed interactions were routine. And Doria, once a silent participant, is now breaking her silence. Her revelations are shocking, uncomfortable, and utterly captivating. Doria described a life behind the scenes that few could imagine. Imagine sitting in a room, listening to your daughter instruct you on exactly how to behave, what to say, when to smile, and even when to cry. Every emotion, every reaction had a purpose. There were no accidental gestures, no spontaneous tears, no unplanned confessions. Every nuance was carefully directed to shape perception and maintain the flawless public image that Meghan had so meticulously built. Doria recounts moments when she would practice the exact words to say during interviews, with cues on timing, tone, and emotional delivery. It was not just coaching, it was scripting. Consider the intensity of this situation. A mother, who naturally wants to support her daughter, suddenly finds herself caught between loyalty and conscience. Doria's role was not passive. She was actively shaping the narrative that the world consumed. She admits now that she sometimes felt like a co-conspirator, aware that these rehearsals and performances were not just harmless preparation, but calculated attempts to influence millions of people. That moral tension was a heavy burden, one that grew heavier with every public appearance. One of the most striking aspects of Doria's account is her honesty about the psychological dynamics involved. She recalls being instructed on emotional expressions, when to look vulnerable, how to pace tears, where to direct her gaze to ensure maximum impact. It wasn't just about appearing supportive. It was about being part of a larger performance that manufactured sympathy and controlled narratives. Imagine the emotional strain of participating in a performance that masquerades as genuine intimacy and vulnerability. The line between authentic reaction and performed emotion blurs, leaving participants questioning their own feelings and ethics. Doria's revelations also shed light on the mechanics of public performance. She explains that rehearsals were sometimes scheduled before major appearances, including charity events, televised interviews, and social media engagements. These were not simple reminders of talking points. They were full-scale rehearsals where gestures, expressions, and even pauses were choreographed. Every moment was engineered to elicit specific reactions from the audience: admiration, empathy, outrage. In essence, Doria's home became a private studio for producing a public persona. Yet, despite the rehearsals and planning, there was also a human element at play. Doria admits she sometimes struggled with guilt, recognizing that what they were doing could be seen as deceptive. There were moments when she questioned whether participating in these orchestrations was morally defensible. She acknowledges that while her intention was to support Meghan, the consequence was contributing to a narrative that manipulated public perception. That tension between familial loyalty and ethical discomfort pervaded every rehearsal, every interaction, and every moment behind closed doors. And it wasn't just about managing Meghan's public persona. Doria describes how these rehearsals affected their private relationship. Conversations that might have been natural and open were instead filtered through the lens of performance. Authenticity became a luxury, spontaneity a risk. Even family interactions were influenced by the need to maintain an image that could withstand public scrutiny. The very act of preparing for public exposure shaped how they communicated in private, creating a feedback loop where performance and reality became increasingly intertwined. Doria also highlighted some of the more subtle, almost invisible elements of the rehearsals. It wasn't just words and tears, it was posture, timing, and facial expressions. Even when Meghan appeared to be casually laughing or sharing a candid moment with her mother, Doria hints that some of these moments had been guided, subtly adjusted to ensure that they projected the desired impression. The revelation is unnerving. How many spontaneous moments did the public witness that were carefully engineered? How many smiles, tears, and gestures were truly unscripted? What makes these confessions even more compelling is the context in which they occur. Doria was not just helping her daughter navigate public life. She was actively participating in shaping the narrative that would dominate headlines and social media feeds worldwide. Her involvement was both protective and manipulative, a duality that underscores the complexity of their dynamic. She wanted to shield Meghan from criticism and maintain her image, yet in doing so, she also became complicit in the creation of illusions that misled millions. Perhaps the most revealing element of Doria's account is the confession that she sometimes felt trapped. Her love for Meghan made it difficult to resist participating, even when she felt uncomfortable or morally conflicted. She was caught between maternal instinct and ethical responsibility, a position that few outsiders could fully comprehend. The weight of complicity, combined with the pressure to perform flawlessly in public, created a tension that affected not only their relationship, but also their individual sense of integrity. And then there were the rehearsals for highly publicized events, The moments that would be broadcast to millions and dissected endlessly by media analysts and social media commentators. Doria recalls being guided on how to react during these events, how to mirror Meghan's emotions, and even how to strategically display vulnerability. It wasn't just a question of etiquette. It was about crafting a narrative that aligned perfectly with Meghan's desired public image. Every gesture had significance, every reaction was deliberate, and every expression was a calculated contribution to the overall performance. Doria also provides insight into the emotional toll this took on her. Participating in these rehearsals was not without consequence. She felt guilt, discomfort, and at times shame for being involved in moments that were designed to manipulate perception. Yet she continued, motivated by loyalty, love, and the desire to protect her daughter. This internal conflict adds a human dimension to the story, reminding the audience that even those complicit in deception are themselves navigating complex emotional landscapes. The larger implication of Doria's revelations is staggering. If even her mother, someone expected to provide unconditional support and honesty, was enlisted to perform, what does that say about the authenticity of Meghan's public image? It suggests a level of orchestration that goes beyond simple media savvy. It hints at a deliberate, strategic effort to shape perception on a global scale. It challenges the public to reconsider everything they have witnessed, every tear, every heartfelt expression, every emotional statement. And yet, Doria's confessions are not purely condemnatory. They provide context, explanation, and a glimpse into the pressures of life in the public eye. They highlight the lengths to which individuals will go to protect those they love, even at the expense of their own ethical comfort. They reveal the human cost of public performance, of managing perception, and of maintaining a persona under constant scrutiny. The revelations are simultaneously shocking, heartbreaking, and deeply human. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Doria's account is what she hints at next. She speaks of moments of extreme emotional intensity, of instances where the boundaries between performance and reality blurred so completely that even she struggled to discern authenticity from artifice. These are the moments that the public will never see, the moments that challenge everything we thought we knew about Meghan, her image, and the carefully constructed world she inhabited. And what Doria revealed about those moments, about the performances that shaped the world's perception of Meghan Markle, and the private sacrifices and moral compromises that made them possible, would leave even her closest allies stunned. The world watched with bated breath. Millions tuned in, gripping their screens, as Meghan Markle shared what appeared to be the most vulnerable moments of her life. Tears fell, voices cracked. The public empathized, mourned, and celebrated her bravery. It was television at its most gripping, a moment that seemed raw, unfiltered, and entirely authentic. Or was it? According to Doria Ragland, some of the most iconic and emotionally charged moments from that interview were not spontaneous at all. They were rehearsed, scripted, planned to perfection. Imagine sitting in a room with your mother, practicing not just your words but your timing, your expressions, your pauses. The exact moment to breathe, to tilt your head, to let the tears roll, each action calculated to maximize emotional impact. For millions, it looked like a woman breaking free from oppression, bravely exposing injustices. For insiders like Doria, it was a performance, a carefully choreographed sequence. The implications are staggering. Consider the sheer reach of that interview. Broadcast globally, dissected by tabloids, social media exploded with commentary, memes, and analysis. Headlines praised her courage, condemned the monarchy, and painted Meghan as a symbol of resilience against centuries of tradition. Every reaction reinforced her image as the courageous, misunderstood figure the public had come to admire. But if even a portion of that was rehearsed, it redefines the entire narrative. It suggests intentionality behind moments that millions experienced as spontaneous, raw emotion. Doria's revelations are particularly striking because they highlight the mechanics of influence. Meghan didn't just tell a story, she staged it. She guided not only her own performance, but also that of her mother. Doria recounts being instructed on how to respond to cues, when to nod, when to look concerned, when to shed tears alongside her daughter. It wasn't just about being supportive, it was about constructing a narrative for the cameras, one that would resonate emotionally and socially. Every gesture, every glance, every tear had purpose. The psychological impact of orchestrating emotion on such a scale is profound. Doria admits that while she initially complied out of loyalty and maternal instinct, she began to feel uneasy. The act of participating in a performance masquerading as authenticity weighs heavily. It forces one to question the morality of manipulation, even when intended to protect or support a loved one. And yet, the performance continued, fueled by the stakes involved, public perception, media narrative, and the fragile image of a young woman navigating a world rife with scrutiny. The interview itself, now iconic, featured moments that were dissected endlessly. Meghan's pauses, the quivering of her voice, her expressions of distress. Millions saw courage and honesty. Yet, Doria's account suggests that some of these moments were carefully staged for maximum emotional effect. Even subtle expressions, the timing of breath, and slight shifts in gaze were part of a deliberate choreography designed to captivate audiences. This reframes the interview not as an unscripted confession, but as a masterclass in performance under pressure. But there's more. The scripting extended beyond the mother-daughter dynamic. Advisors, PR teams, and confidants were reportedly involved, ensuring that each segment of the interview aligned with broader narratives Meghan sought to communicate. The goal was clear: to present her story in a way that would garner empathy, generate media attention, and solidify her position as a sympathetic figure navigating an unsympathetic institution. It wasn't just storytelling. It was strategic emotional management on a global stage. And yet, even with preparation, there were risks. Doria reveals that the rehearsals carried emotional consequences. Participating in a performance of grief, fear, and vulnerability takes a toll. It requires suspending personal judgment, engaging in emotional labor, and maintaining composure while producing convincing displays of authenticity. For Doria, the burden was not just logistical, but deeply personal. She had to balance her own discomfort with her desire to support Meghan, all while being acutely aware that the world was watching, even if they didn't know how carefully choreographed it was. The most shocking part, Doria hints, was the extent of control Meghan exerted. Not only did she guide her mother's responses, but she also monitored and adjusted her own performance in real time. Every gesture was deliberate, every line delivered with precision, every emotional beat strategically placed to maximize impact. It wasn't mere acting. It was psychological engineering aimed at shaping perception and influencing public sentiment. Think about the consequences. Millions reacted with empathy, admiration, and even outrage on Meghan's behalf. The interview sparked conversations, debates, and media coverage that dominated headlines for weeks. If parts of that narrative were orchestrated, it calls into question how audiences process authenticity and how easily public perception can be influenced by carefully managed emotional displays. What does it mean to root for someone, to empathize with them, when the emotional cues are constructed? Doria's insights also reveal the strain such a performance places on personal relationships. When private interactions are constantly framed through a lens of performance, trust becomes complicated. Genuine emotion becomes hard to distinguish from strategy. For those involved, the boundary between support and manipulation blurs. Doria struggled with this tension, recognizing that her complicity, while motivated by love, contributed to a story consumed as truth by millions. There's also a fascinating element of irony here. The public embraced Meghan as authentic, courageous, and vulnerable. The very traits that drew admiration may have been at least partially orchestrated. That tension between perception and reality, between genuine emotion and constructed performance, creates a narrative full of contradiction, suspense, and intrigue. It forces viewers to reevaluate everything they witnessed, to question how much of it was reality and how much was meticulously planned. And yet, even as we consider the performance, we cannot ignore the human complexity. Doria's participation, Meghan's planning, and the overall orchestration highlight the pressures of life in the public eye. Navigating global scrutiny, familial expectations, and the demands of the media requires strategy, even at the cost of personal authenticity. The ethical compromises, emotional labor, and psychological burden of such performance add depth to our understanding of what public life entails. Doria also emphasizes that these rehearsals were not arbitrary. They were strategic. Every emotional display was timed for maximum media impact. Every line was designed to reinforce a specific narrative. Meghan as misunderstood, victimized, yet resilient. Every gesture was crafted to resonate with an audience conditioned to respond to certain cues: sympathy, admiration, outrage. It was not just storytelling. It was influence, persuasion, and perception management on an unprecedented scale. And then there were the moments Doria struggled to watch even in rehearsal. Moments when the performance required more than acting, when the emotional intensity crossed into reality, blurring lines between genuine feeling and calculated display. She recalls times when she questioned whether participating was right, moments of moral doubt, and the heavy weight of knowing that the audience would never understand the preparation, the scripting, or the compromises behind the scenes. Ultimately, the interview that millions celebrated as a revelation of truth may have been as much a carefully constructed performance as a confession. It demonstrates not only Meghan's mastery of public narrative, but also the ethical and emotional complexities involved in orchestrating such a display. It challenges assumptions about authenticity, vulnerability, and the ways public figures communicate with the world. But the story doesn't end with the interview. Doria hints at even more shocking aspects. The rehearsals, the coaching, and the performances extended far beyond that televised event. There were private moments, intimate interactions, and orchestrated public appearances that the world has yet to see, moments designed to build, reinforce, and sustain Meghan's image. And what Doria revealed next about those hidden performances would send shockwaves through everyone who believed they had seen the real Meghan Markle. Have you ever watched someone cry and felt every ounce of their pain as if it were your own, only to later discover it might have been staged? The notion is unsettling, almost impossible to process. And yet, according to Doria Ragland, this was a recurring reality in Meghan Markle's life. Some of the tears the public witnessed, the emotional displays that moved millions, were not spontaneous at all. They were rehearsed, orchestrated, and performed with precision. Imagine a scenario where a mother and daughter sit together, reviewing an upcoming public appearance. Every emotional beat, every tear, every shuddering breath is choreographed. Doria recounts being instructed not only on how to cry, but when, how long to pause, how to tilt her head to appear vulnerable. These were not casual suggestions. They were calculated measures to ensure the audience would respond in the intended way. The goal was empathy, trust, and loyalty from the viewers, all manufactured through controlled displays of emotion. The idea that tears could be rehearsed seems almost theatrical. Yet, in the realm of public life, where every expression is scrutinized, even the smallest lapse can be amplified into scandal. Meghan and her mother understood that perfection demanded preparation. Each public event was more than an appearance. It was a performance designed to shape perception. The public believed they were witnessing raw vulnerability. Behind the scenes, Doria reveals, it was an intricate system of cues, timing, and rehearsals, an emotional blueprint executed to perfection. What makes this revelation even more chilling is the psychological complexity involved. Participating in a staged emotional display takes a toll. There is a constant tension between authenticity and performance. The performer must engage enough with the emotion to make it believable, yet maintain control to avoid being consumed by it. Doria describes the strain of this duality, the act of generating tears while knowing, deep down, that they were intended to influence perception rather than arise organically. The mental and emotional labor involved is staggering. Consider the reactions of the audience. Millions empathized, sympathized, and connected emotionally with Meghan's perceived vulnerability. Social media exploded with support, news outlets amplified her narrative, and the world embraced her as a courageous, misunderstood figure. If these emotional displays were orchestrated, it reframes not only the public's response, but the ethical dimensions of emotional influence. It calls into question how much of what we react to in public life is authentic and how much is carefully engineered. Doria also reveals that this manipulation of emotion extended beyond herself. Advisors and PR teams were sometimes involved, suggesting the optimal way to present vulnerability, offering tips on expressions and phrasing. Even small gestures, such as tilting the head at a specific angle, letting a hand tremble slightly, or pausing before a sentence were part of the design. The meticulous attention to detail underscores how intentional and sophisticated these performances were. And yet, there was a human cost. Doria admits that the rehearsal of tears created tension and guilt. She questioned whether helping craft these moments was right. Could she reconcile her love and loyalty to her daughter with the deception inherent in performing vulnerability for public consumption? The inner conflict was palpable, the emotional burden immense. Participating in these rehearsals meant complicity in shaping a narrative that millions took as truth, and the weight of that complicity was heavy. But there's more to consider. The rehearsed tears were not simply about eliciting sympathy. They were tools of strategic communication. They conveyed a story, a persona, and a calculated vulnerability that reinforced Meghan's public image. Every tear had a purpose. Every pause was designed to amplify effect. Emotional manipulation, when executed at this scale, becomes a subtle yet powerful instrument of influence. The audience believes they are witnessing honesty, while the reality may be far more complex. Doria also highlights how these rehearsals affected personal dynamics. A mother's role is typically one of guidance, protection, and support. In this case, Doria's support included participation in a performance, which required her to suppress her own instincts, mirror calculated emotions, and act in ways that were not entirely authentic. This added strain to their relationship, blurring the line between love, loyalty, and ethical responsibility. The act of rehearsing tears, while seemingly a minor detail, became a profound illustration of the sacrifices and compromises demanded by life in the public eye. And the stakes were high. Public appearances weren't just opportunities for visibility. They were strategic moments designed to shape narratives, sway opinion, and build sympathy. A single unconvincing tear could undermine years of image building. The precision required was immense. Doria's account shows that even those closest to Meghan were acutely aware of the potential consequences of a misstep. The rehearsal of emotion became not only a performance, but a protective mechanism, a shield against criticism, and a tool of influence. There's also a broader implication here. The phenomenon of performed vulnerability isn't limited to Meghan Markle. It reflects the pressures faced by anyone living under intense public scrutiny. In a world where perception often outweighs reality, emotional performance becomes a survival skill. Yet, Doria's confession adds a deeply personal dimension, revealing the emotional labor and moral complexity involved when a family member is enlisted to participate in such performances. It's one thing to project emotion for self-protection. It's another to guide and manipulate the emotional responses of others for the sake of public perception. And let's not forget the audience. Millions worldwide felt moved, inspired, and emotionally connected. But those reactions were not entirely organic. They were influenced by carefully calibrated emotional cues. This raises profound questions about trust, authenticity, and the power of performance in shaping public opinion. How much of what we experience as genuine empathy is, in fact, a response to cues designed to elicit it? How do we separate truth from strategy when both are performed seamlessly on a global stage? Doria's revelations also shed light on the ethical dimension of these rehearsals. She acknowledges regret, the sense of moral conflict, and the realization that even well-intentioned participation in a performance can manipulate perception in ways that have far-reaching consequences. It's a cautionary tale about the intersection of family loyalty, public image, and ethical responsibility. Her experience underscores how deeply the act of performing emotion can affect everyone involved, not just the audience, but those performing and those guiding the performance. And then there's the darker side, the calculated use of vulnerability to gain power, sympathy, and influence. The tears, the pauses, the emotional inflections, they weren't random, they were instruments. They shaped narratives, commanded attention, and influenced opinion. For those outside the performance, it appeared spontaneous and genuine. For those inside, like Doria, it was a carefully orchestrated process, one that required discipline, timing, and emotional control. Perhaps the most unsettling revelation is the realization that even those closest to Meghan could be complicit, participating in the illusion. Rehearsed tears weren't just about optics. They were about constructing reality. And for Doria, participating meant navigating a complex web of loyalty, ethics, and emotional labor. Every moment of performance carried weight, responsibility, and consequence. And just when it seemed the rehearsals had covered every aspect of public appearances, Doria hints at moments even more extreme. Moments where emotional performance intersected with manipulation on a level that even she found shocking. These were instances where the boundary between authentic emotion and performance blurred entirely, leaving her questioning the ethics of participation and the consequences of creating such a compelling illusion. And what Doria revealed next, about the carefully orchestrated moments that manipulated not only perception but sentiment, trust, and empathy, would shock everyone who believed they had ever witnessed Meghan's real emotions. What happens when love and loyalty collide with moral ambiguity? When the person you trust the most, someone you've counted on to guide, support, and protect, becomes entangled in orchestrating illusions that the world consumes as truth. This is the heart of the mother-daughter dynamic between Doria Ragland and Meghan Markle. It's a relationship layered with affection, ambition, and, as Doria now admits, complicity. For decades, Doria has been Meghan's anchor. A single mother raising a daughter in Los Angeles, she instilled values of perseverance, ambition, and poise. She nurtured her daughter's confidence while protecting her from the harsh realities of the world. But when Meghan stepped into the unforgiving glare of global scrutiny, the rules of engagement changed. Suddenly, loyalty wasn't enough. It had to manifest as performance. Doria's support became a tool in shaping a public narrative, a role that demanded both emotional labor and moral compromise. Doria's own words paint a revealing picture. She recalls how Meghan instructed her on everything from public gestures to emotional responses. "We rehearsed the tears," she said. "I regret helping her lie." Those words aren't just a confession. They're a window into the ethical tightrope she walked. How does a mother reconcile the desire to support her child with the realization that she is participating in deception? How does one balance unconditional love with integrity when every rehearsal, every coached reaction is designed to manipulate perception? The dynamic is complex. On the surface, it appears as collaboration, a mother aiding her daughter in navigating the treacherous waters of public life. But Doria's revelations suggest something deeper, a partnership in performance. She was not merely advising or protecting. She was participating, rehearsing, and executing a persona crafted to influence millions. It raises profound questions. At what point does support become complicity? When does loyalty compromise ethical boundaries? The stakes of this dynamic are enormous. Public perception shapes careers, reputations, and personal legacies. For Meghan, every appearance was scrutinized, every word dissected. A misstep could trigger headlines, social media backlash, and even institutional consequences. Doria's role as a mother became entwined with the mechanics of influence. She was not only witnessing the narrative, she was co-authoring it, helping to craft a version of reality that millions accepted without question. Yet, the emotional consequences cannot be overstated. Doria confesses that participating in rehearsed emotional displays induced guilt and moral conflict. She grappled with the knowledge that the tears, expressions, and vulnerability projected to the world were partially constructed. And still, the bond of maternal love and loyalty compelled her to continue. Every rehearsal, every coached gesture, was a negotiation between conscience and devotion. It's also telling that the mother-daughter relationship itself became a component of the performance. The public perceives Doria as a supportive, loving presence, a figure who embodies stability and authenticity in contrast to Meghan's glamorous, high-pressure world. Yet even that image was carefully managed. Doria's reactions, expressions, and involvement in public events were influenced by instructions and rehearsals, shaping how audiences perceived both women. Loyalty and complicity were intertwined so seamlessly that the lines between private reality and public persona blurred completely. And consider the emotional manipulation at play. Doria, while guided by love, was participating in a process that influenced not only public perception but her own feelings. She was coached on when to show concern, when to look sad, and when to mirror her daughter's vulnerability. The process forced her to navigate her own emotions while simultaneously projecting controlled responses for public consumption. It's a deeply human story, one that illustrates how familial bonds can become instruments in the orchestration of image and influence. The paradox is striking. The very same love that compels Doria to participate also creates tension, doubt, and regret. Loyalty binds her to her daughter, yet ethical questions gnaw at her conscience. There is an emotional cost to complicity, and Doria's confession underscores the human struggle inherent in performing loyalty under intense public scrutiny. It's a tension that many may never see, yet it shapes the narrative in profound ways. Moreover, this dynamic highlights the influence of family in shaping public figures. While advisors, publicists, and media consultants play crucial roles, the participation of a parent carries a weight that transcends professional guidance. Doria's involvement lent credibility, intimacy, and authenticity to the performance. Her presence in rehearsals, her carefully timed reactions, and her emotional alignment with Meghan created a facade that audiences perceived as natural. Without such involvement, the performance might have seemed less convincing. Yet, there is also a sense of inevitability in Doria's role. As a mother, she wanted to protect her daughter, to shield her from criticism, and to ensure she succeeded in a world that scrutinized her relentlessly. The rehearsals and orchestrations became a form of protection, a strategy to guard against misinterpretation, ridicule, or backlash. It was a calculated choice, one that prioritized Meghan's public image but came at a personal moral cost. The broader implications are profound. This story forces us to examine the role of family in shaping public personas, especially in high-stakes environments. It challenges our understanding of authenticity, trust, and loyalty. When familial bonds intersect with strategy, performance, and public perception, the consequences extend far beyond individual relationships. They affect the way millions perceive reality, emotion, and character. And then there's the human element. The moments of doubt, the whispered regrets, the silent moral reckonings. Doria admits that she sometimes questioned her participation, wondering if the support she provided was ethical or manipulative. She balanced love, duty, and conscience, navigating a complex landscape where every gesture carried consequence. Her confession adds nuance, empathy, and depth to our understanding of the pressures faced by those living in the public eye. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of the mother-daughter dynamic is the psychological interplay. Meghan exercised control over her image not just through public appearances, but by guiding the responses of those closest to her. Doria's cooperation highlights the subtle power dynamics at work: love, loyalty, and influence converging to shape reality in ways that the public never witnessed. It's a delicate dance where emotional manipulation and familial devotion exist side by side, creating a narrative both compelling and ethically complex. The paradox of this relationship becomes even more striking when considering Doria's eventual regret. Her participation in orchestrated performances brought visibility and empathy to Meghan, yet it also exacted a personal cost. Complicity in public manipulation created tension, guilt, and moral ambiguity, forces that lingered long after cameras were off and the public had moved on. And just when it seemed the story of loyalty versus complicity could be neatly summarized, Doria hints at even more shocking revelations. There were moments behind closed doors, performances and rehearsals so intense and calculated that even she struggled to reconcile them with her own values. Moments that went beyond coaching or guidance. Moments that crossed the boundary into deliberate emotional engineering. And what Doria revealed about those private, carefully orchestrated moments, the ones that shaped not only public perception but the very narrative of Meghan's life, would leave even her closest confidants stunned. We've all watched a public figure endure scrutiny, criticism, or tragedy and felt a wave of empathy wash over us. We relate to their struggles, admire their resilience, and sometimes even mourn with them. But what happens when the emotion we're responding to is not entirely authentic? When the vulnerability presented to the world is partially, or even largely, constructed? According to Doria Ragland, this was the hidden reality behind Meghan Markle's carefully managed public image. The world saw Meghan as the ultimate outsider, a woman struggling against the weight of tradition, unfair media coverage, and personal attacks. She was framed as the victim, the misunderstood figure whose honesty and courage inspired admiration. But behind closed doors, Doria reveals, The narrative was managed meticulously. Rehearsals, coached reactions, and calculated displays of emotion ensured that the public would perceive Meghan in precisely the way she intended. Sympathy was earned, yes, but it was strategically orchestrated. Consider the intensity of her public appearances. Every wave to a crowd, every press smile, every pause during interviews was not left to chance. Doria describes being instructed on her own responses, too, creating a mirrored effect that amplified Meghan's intended emotions. The public witnessed a mother supporting her daughter, a woman exuding grace and empathy. But those gestures, as Doria admits, were partially guided, part of a larger choreography aimed at maximizing perception. It was performance layered over reality. The implications are profound. Public sympathy is powerful. It drives headlines, fuels social media movements, and influences public opinion. For Meghan, cultivating sympathy enhanced her narrative, positioned her as resilient and relatable, and garnered support during moments of personal and professional challenge. But when that sympathy is built, even in part, on orchestrated emotion, it challenges our understanding of authenticity. It forces us to ask, how much of the empathy we feel for public figures is influenced, intentionally or subconsciously, by performance? Doria's insight also reveals the emotional labor required to maintain these illusions. Rehearsing tears, practicing expressions, and guiding reactions are not simply technical exercises. They are deeply human acts that demand psychological engagement. Participating in these moments meant suppressing spontaneity, managing internal feelings, and presenting a controlled front that aligned with the narrative. The line between authentic reaction and strategic performance becomes razor-thin, leaving participants like Doria questioning both their actions and their complicity. This orchestration of emotion extends to public storytelling as well. Meghan's interviews, public speeches, and social media statements often carried undertones that evoked empathy, admiration, or outrage. Each detail, carefully calibrated, elicited responses the audience might have interpreted as natural, spontaneous, or even intimate. But as Doria reveals, many of these moments were planned, rehearsed, and directed to convey maximum emotional impact. This duality, between public perception and private orchestration, lies at the heart of the tension between sympathy and reality. The consequences of such manipulation are multifaceted. On one hand, the public's support shields the individual, provides social validation, and creates a protective narrative against criticism. On the other hand, it raises ethical concerns. The deliberate shaping of emotion, even by loved ones, challenges notions of honesty, transparency, and trust. Doria's admission that she helped craft these moments forces a reconsideration of what the audience experienced and how perception can be influenced by unseen guidance. Beyond the mechanics of performance, there's the question of personal impact. Doria recounts the strain of constantly calibrating her own reactions, balancing authenticity with performance, and managing the psychological weight of participating in staged emotional displays. This wasn't a one-time event. It was an ongoing process that intertwined with the daily rhythms of life, affecting private interactions, family dynamics, and individual well-being. Maintaining the appearance of authenticity for a global audience demanded sacrifices few could fully appreciate. Public sympathy, when carefully manufactured, also has strategic value. It provides leverage, shifts narratives, and can influence outcomes in subtle and significant ways. Doria reveals that part of the rehearsal process was understanding how audiences would react to specific emotional cues, ensuring that the perception created aligned with Meghan's broader objectives. Empathy became not just a response, but a tool, engineered to shape understanding and sentiment. Yet, the irony cannot be ignored. The audience believed they were connecting with raw, unfiltered human emotion. They responded with support, admiration, and even loyalty. Social media campaigns, trending hashtags, and viral stories reinforced the idea of authenticity. The very performance designed to evoke empathy succeeded so thoroughly that few questioned its orchestration. Public sympathy was not just achieved, it was amplified to near-universal resonance. And then there's the tension between public persona and private reality. While the world saw resilience, vulnerability, and courage, the private moments were laden with rehearsal, instruction, and guidance. Authentic emotion and strategic performance coexisted, often indistinguishably. Doria's participation highlights the complexity of this interplay, supporting a loved one while simultaneously engaging in a crafted narrative. It's a delicate balance, one that few outsiders could understand, yet one with profound consequences for both perception and relationship. Furthermore, these revelations challenge the way we evaluate public figures. How do we discern genuine emotion from calculated display? How much do we trust the narratives presented to us? When loved ones participate in orchestrating emotional perception, the boundary between authenticity and performance becomes nearly invisible, leaving audiences to engage with crafted reality as if it were unfiltered truth. Doria also notes the long-term psychological effects of this dynamic. Participating in rehearsed performances, calibrating reactions, and navigating the emotional landscape of public scrutiny creates tension, guilt, and cognitive dissonance. Those involved must reconcile loyalty, love, and complicity while maintaining composure in the face of public consumption. It's a human cost rarely visible but deeply impactful. And yet, the orchestration of sympathy was remarkably effective. Audiences connected emotionally, drew inspiration, and rallied around Meghan. The narrative resonated because it appeared authentic, because the emotions felt real, and because the presentation was seamless. What the audience never knew, however, was that Doria and others were integral to crafting the emotional storylines, ensuring that every tear, pause, and reaction aligned with the intended perception. But the dichotomy of public sympathy versus private reality raises critical questions. When empathy is manufactured, what does it mean for trust? When emotional responses are orchestrated, how does that reshape our understanding of authenticity? Doria's confession suggests that for Meghan, managing the balance between appearance and reality was not only strategic, but essential to controlling public perception. And just when it seemed the rehearsals and emotional calibrations had achieved perfection, Doria hints at moments even more manipulative, incidents where private strategies influence public sentiment in ways the world could never imagine. These hidden maneuvers, conducted behind the scenes, would ultimately redefine the narrative of sympathy, revealing the extent to which reality and performance were intertwined in Meghan Markle's carefully constructed public life. And what Doria revealed next, about the private strategies behind public perception, the hidden choreography of sympathy, and the moments that manipulated not just hearts but opinion, would leave the public questioning everything they thought they knew about Meghan's authenticity. That in the world of celebrities and royals, secrets have a way of surfacing. But when those secrets come from the people closest to you, the impact is exponentially greater. For Meghan Markle, the meticulously curated narrative she presented to the public faced repeated cracks in the form of leaks, scandals, and contradictions. Doria Ragland's revelations now shed light on just how much of the polished image was maintained behind the scenes, and how fragile that image truly was. Leaks have a peculiar power. They take the carefully controlled and expose it to chaos. Meghan's life, already under intense scrutiny, was vulnerable to this kind of disruption. Friends, advisors, and even minor staff could become unintentional narrators, revealing discrepancies or contradictions in what the public was shown versus the private reality. Doria's confession suggests that part of the reason rehearsals and stage performances existed was to preempt these leaks, creating a seamless persona that left little room for